So yeah, that's
Oh, here comes my daughter yelling and screaming. She sensed that I hit the record button. Say hello, Rosalie.
I.
Say hi to Kale, Roro. Hi. Okay. Can you? She went to the library. She'll be right back. Okay. We're gonna do this, and then you go in there, please. Please. Thank you. All right. Love you. And then my wife is texting me.
Oh.
Um, I, I had another meeting today that I forgot about. I forgot about two meetings today, honestly. And one was with my kids. And I sent her to the library, and it's the wrong library.
Oh no. Oh.
Yeah. Shoot. Uh, I did do that. She's already so mad at me. This is bad. All right. So yeah. So whoops. Um, where were we? We're going to talk about, so as far as club stuff goes, I know that the people are looking forward to the anniversary party, and I don't have much to say on that right now. I know that a lot of people are talking about traveling, and January is a super bad time to try and free people up, and that's when the club was founded. So I think that if we do something like that, it would have to be later, maybe towards spring or summer, when more people with their families can get out to Oregon for it. Because January is, first of all, it's awful here, and everybody's coming off the holidays. So I don't know that travel is an it's not an opportune time to travel.
I mean, for me, like, because we're up in Seattle, it's really pretty easy. It's just a 3 hour drive,
Right.
right? But I understand that if you're coming from a long distance, and it's
Yeah, there's people from like the Midwest and Colorado and stuff like that wanting to come out here.
there was some
Um,
talk. I think Bob had posted that he wanted to see if we could have it in California, and I was like, I don't know about that.
yeah, the challenge with that is the only person there is Bob. We'd all be traveling to him. But yeah, I'm not really sure where to go with that one yet. I do know that it won't be January. There hasn't been any kind of preparation for it.
I
Uh,
mean, yeah, it doesn't have. I mean, it's it doesn't have to be in January, right? It can be
right.
whenever,
It
right?
doesn't. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
maybe
And
there's
it wouldn't be.
yeah, maybe there's a better maybe there's a date that makes more sense. That's more in like this the summertime or something like that, where it's easier to get a big group together.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I was thinking more something like that and putting it out there to the group. Um, and not much else has been going on with club stuff there. It's at least, but not with me. I've appreciated the way that you've stepped up and kept the conversation going on the page, and there have been a lot of active members, kind of keeping that going. I'm still just hitting approve whenever people, um, are wanting to become members, and I might extend that admin privilege to a couple key members like you and Stuart and folks who are seem to be involved in the club at a higher level.
Yeah.
So that way, if you want to hit the button when people want to want to join, you're able to do that.
Okay.
But there's not a lot of other admin privileges to the to the club,
Yeah.
because we don't have like approval for comments or things like that. We did it first because people kept coming in and talking about Clarity Firms, so I had comment approval on. But once we got it figured out that this is not what that club was about, it's kind of stayed
Yeah.
away from the topic.
Yeah. Yeah, whatever I can do to help out, or I mean, the Facebook page is kind of like the hub, I think, for a lot of activity, and
Definitely.
it's like it's good and it's bad. To me, it's like good because there's a lot of conversation going on, but to me, the bad thing about it is there's a lot of really useful information that just kind of like gets lost
Yeah.
as kind of it gets pushed down in the results. I mean, there's a lot of good comments where like, wow, that's a great comment. That's really useful information. But if you can't, it's not like a forum or something like that where it's easy to have a thread to go back to and
Definitely.
trace it back. So there's good things and bad things about it, right? So I sent you a message about the new brewery that's opening up in West Seattle. Did you know? Yeah.
Cold Crash. I saw that they had asked to be in the club, like they had their beer page liked the club.
Oh, cool. All right, yeah. So I was going back and forth with them, and they were saying they were opening at the end of January, and they would be interested in me coming out there and for maybe February, and instead of being at Ghost Fish for a meeting, maybe end of February, I could be out there.
Oh, that'd be fun.
And they might be. I think that they could be like on at that meeting to talk about kind of opening a new brewery. And
absolutely.
I thought that was a good movie.
Yeah. That's great. That's excellent. Yeah, that's exciting that you guys are getting a second brewery up there.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I don't know anything about it. Like,
yeah, they just showed up one day, like with like fully formed web page and fully formed Facebook page and doing media rounds, and I'm like, oh, that's exciting. I hadn't heard anything about this, you know.
Exactly. Yeah.
Usually, like with Jason's thing, Mutantis, it's like there's this long build up to it, or like with Neff, it was the same way. You know, there was this long build up, like Neff is coming, guys, look out, new era fermentations. You know, it's coming, and then finally it showed up. But these guys just kind of like appeared one day, saying, you know, we're opening. It's like, oh, great, good job. So that's pretty cool. All right. So we haven't had a topic discussion for a while, and I did put together a little PowerPoint about speed brewing, and I'll go ahead and switch over to that for now.
Did you already start recording?
Yeah, I did. Right when I noticed that I had sent my wife to the wrong library is when I.
So you'll have that for purposes.
Yep.
Okay.
She'll never let me forget, and neither will that. So slideshow presentation mode. Are you able to see?
Yep, I can see it.
Okay, great. Cool. So speed brewing. So this is the reason I chose this topic for today is that I think a lot of us find ourselves in this situation often, and this is definitely a time when it comes up a lot for various reasons. So the scenario is you have empty kegs, and this is really going to be pretty much limited to keggers, people who keg. Speed brewing, it's not really something you're going to be able to turn around beers quickly if you're bottle conditioning. The time frame that we're talking about is probably 2 to 3 weeks from grain to glass, and that's how long bottle conditioning takes. So it's going to be double this time. So really, this is strictly for my keggers. So you have an upcoming event, would be an opportunity to use this method. Say it's a holiday party or somebody's wedding, or you're going to be visiting relatives are visiting you. Or maybe you've had a lot of people at your house and they absolutely killed your supply. They've finished off your kegerator for you because people have been coming over and visiting. Or in this case, say your holiday demands have interrupted your brew schedule and you're behind. You're spending all your weekends hanging Christmas lights and putting up the Christmas tree and going shopping, and you haven't had any time to brew, and now it's time to catch up. I didn't choose a thing like holiday beers for the topic because the ship has really sailed on holiday beers. You're not going to be able to brew a holiday beer by Christmas, on the 15th of December. So really the process is, honestly, you're going to have to cut some corners. You're going to have to find places to cut time. And the best time to cut the time is off of the ends, the beginning and the end here. So when we talk about cutting from the beginning, it all starts with your recipe design. So high gravity beers, big beers, those are out. Those take too long to mellow out for the alcohols to develop those subtle notes and to get from being loud and headache inducing fusels and estery type of flavors. So no big beers. And now's the time that it's okay to lower those standards. We all love to apply our craft, but brewing beer fast, it takes craft. So don't get hung up on being artful with, I only do Belgians and triples and maybe lagers and sours. No dry hopped, like no quadruple IPA, or milkshake, maybe milkshake things. I haven't brewed a lot of those, but I understand since those have a bad shelf life, they can be turned quickly.
Hey Joe, So if you're not brewing those type of beers, what are like the top beers that you would consider like that would work for speed brewing?
So anything in that amber color range that's a lower gravity, amber or dark even, things that are going to conceal any flaws that may survive this rapid process. So you want things that clarity may not be a major concern. So darker beers are good. Red beers with a lot of caramel malts, they tend to mask a lot of imperfections. So, reds, dry stout, although sometimes it does take a little time for those particulates to fall out. You might get a little bit of an acrid flavor if you're speeding them up. But definitely not things that are going to be those edge of the style beers. You're aiming more for a pale ale, a red ale. You can pull off lagers quickly, but maybe not as quickly as you would like. And we'll talk about some of the methods to get these done quickly. But lower gravity beers, keep it under 6% for the most part. And you're going to cut out unnecessary steps like dry hopping or wood and fruit additions, kettle souring, things like that are going to take multiple days, and add those days back to your calendar. Let me talk through this real quick, honey. All right. My daughter had something to add. So the way that you cut from the end, so that was cutting from the beginning, your recipe design. We'll talk about some brew day things as well to get the beer fermenting quickly. So cutting from the end, there are some steps that you can take, and these will require that you cold crash the beer. It's cold most places in North America right now. So if you've got a garage, it might be cold enough, or the back porch might be cold enough to stick your beer out there and get the yeast out of suspension quickly. It works great when you couple that with finings. My favorite is called BioFine Clear. You can also use gelatin or something like that. And you got to force carb in these situations. Even if you're planning on putting the beer into bottles, carbonating it quickly in a keg and then filling those bottles from the keg is a good way to turn them around quickly if you do insist on bottles. Let's see. Some more detail from cutting from the beginning. So you want to do the small grain beers, small grain bills that have a low gravity. So keep that under 6, like we talked about. I didn't talk much about color here, but I did with Kale on that question. Just in that red to black range really seems to be the best method, because those paler beers. Now, if you're doing something like a blonde ale, you might be able to pull that off if you're fining it, or if you're not too hung up on clarity. The clarity, I think, is the issue there. And the best way to get that clarity would start with your yeast selection. You want to pitch really a lot of yeast and something that's going to flocculate quickly. I listed here that SO4 is an all-star. That's I think, British ale yeast by Safale. And there's a lot of versions of that beer out through different suppliers. But that one, it heats up fast. And it will churn through a small beer in like 3 or 4 days and then start winding down. And then it drops through the floor of your garage in a week. It just drops out so quickly. You really beer.
Hey, Joe, what do you think about like those new gadgets like that tilt hydrometer that you can see exactly when your beer is the same gravity for a couple days, so you know when, hey, it's done, right? Whereas you're not having to pull samples and all that stuff. It seems like I know those are expensive little gadgets. You can pull samples, but a lot of times it's like kind of, I feel like there's all these little steps where sometimes it just feels like a hassle, right?
Right. I don't have one of those, but it sounds like a great idea. I do wish I had visibility to where my fermentations were. I don't like getting to a week into a fermentation, noticing that, Croissant's gone and the yeast is starting to slow down. And then I go check it and it's at 1025. It's like, wow, I really would have taken some steps to, to push this along if I hadn't, missed the window. And now I got to warm things up, shake things around, hope to God that it reinvigorates the yeast to start going, add some nutrient maybe. But yeah, if you're able to monitor it in real time, that's great. Do that. And then I joked earlier that it's time to lower those standards. You might be, I only brew Belgian triples type of guy, but now, that's not an option for you. If you're trying to get a beer into kegs in 2 weeks, that's probably not going to work for you. So consider some things that you might not normally have in your, at your disposal. So cider kits are a great way to turn a beer around quickly. You can go to Gluten-Free Home Brewing or even Amazon or something, your local homebrew store, and get yourself a cider kit for $30 or $40, add 2 pounds of sugar to it, dilute it, and crank that thing out with no boil in just a couple of weeks. You could also consider doing an extract beer with sorghum. That will take time off of your brew day, and they tend to drop pretty clear when you're doing a sorghum beer. There's things that you got to work with on flavor there that you might not have to address as far as maybe your all grain beers, but it's a thing to look at. And like I said, now is not the time to be snooty. We're just worried about filling kegs here.
Yeah. Hey, I feel like I get totally wrapped into just seeing how many different specialty grains I can fit into my grain bill and crafting. Right. What am I going to do with my process here? All my tools and it ends up just kind of complicating things to the point where it's sometimes it's hard to get motivated to even brew, right? So I think for myself, I've been thinking about doing speed brewing just because I want to do something that's not super complicated, right? I think that sometimes, like my first beer that I ever did was like the Ghost Fish extract version of the grapefruit IPA, right? That was the only time I ever used sorghum. After that, everything else was all grain all the time. I think it's nice sometimes to be able to shorten your brew day down and bust something out and know that it's going to be in a keg within a couple weeks, right?
Right. And the good thing about this is it is reinforcing really all of the essential, all of the real basic things. So you're cutting corners, but the corners that you're cutting aren't those elemental things. You're doubling down on the elemental things like sanitation, fermentation, temperature control, pitching healthy yeast, oxygenation. Those aren't corners that you can cut. In fact, they will slow your process down if you do cut them. What it does is it reinforces those fundamental things. And the corners that you're cutting are the nice to have. So you're cutting out your fruit additions, you're cutting out your crazy grain bills and, your triple decoction type of things. And you're just trying to get straight to the keg as cleanly as possible. And there's a craft in that. I mean, it's not always about overcomplicating things for yourself. So the key to everything is always going to be your fermentation, and you want to give it a chance to succeed. If you're trying to brew a beer quickly, you have to lay the foundation for the beer itself to take off for you. You don't want to hit lag. So shorten your lag time by pitching large pitches of healthy yeast. You want fast-working, fast-flocculating yeasts. I gave a good example there of SO4, which just flies. You can do a starter. If you can do a starter, or if you can pitch some yeast that has already fermented a beer out, if you're into repitching or rinsing your yeast, if you've got one and it's ready to go, especially if it's in that mode, it's active and ready to go, use it rather than just pitching straight on, dry yeast straight onto the top of your wort and hoping for the best. If you don't oxygenate, it's essential to this, and it's a good time to learn. So you can use an aquarium pump to pump air in, or you can just shake your carboy or your fermenter for a good 30 minutes straight. Or I've got like these, the disposable canisters that hook up to an oxygenation stone, and I just blow pure oxygen from, it's like a $10 Home Depot oxygen tank. It's an expensive way to do it, but it does get oxygen into your beer quickly. And that's going to be essential to getting that fast start. You want a big nutrient pitch. We should all be using quite a bit of nutrient in our gluten-free beers, even more so if you're wanting this to be a quick turnaround. Like I said before, you want low-gravity beers that don't reveal those flaws easily. And that's what you should be working with in your wort. And you just want to control that temperature. You ideally want something that's going to, like the image here, you want it to start below your target temp. So say you're starting, if you want your beer to start to ferment at 68, that you're just set on that. You start at 65, let it rise to that temperature, and then don't let it drop below that temperature until you're done fermenting and ready to get cold. In fact, you should be working to go up, especially near the end, to just keep that fermentation going as it begins to lag and get slow. Just keep that temperature rising so that it does not crash out on you. And say in this example where I said you wanted to ferment at 68, once you're about halfway through fermentation, start raising it a degree or two per day until you hit 72. You notice you're fully attenuated, everything's looking good, and now it's time to give yourself a chance here to get the beer clear. Once it's hit terminal gravity, you know that it's been at, say, 1010 or 1016 for 3 days straight. You're like, okay, now it's time to go, and it's time to fill those kegs.
Hey, Joe.
Yeah.
Just going back to the fermentation temperature control.
Right.
So I feel like I use brew jackets. I think, what do you use, like a refrigerator that uses a fermentation chamber?
So I have a fermentation chamber. I have a fridge with and I just basically keep it pretty cold. And then I use one of those reptile wraps. It's like a flex heating wrap. It's like a little heating pad. It wraps around my keg, or my fermenter, and it has a thermal well that goes down into the beer from the stopper. And I have a temperature controller hooked to that. And I will set it at, say, my desired temperature is 65. And then as the fridge is getting it cold, that flex wrap is warming up to keep it bracketed to within about a degree. So it might drop down to 64, and then it kicks on and warms it back up. And that's how I've always done it. It's just kind of a two-phase thing to have that temperature controller hooked to a heater inside of a refrigerator that's kind of keeping it cold.
So I think that the controlling of the fermentation temperature is key. You have to have a way to accomplish that. There's all sorts of different methods that people use to accomplish that. But if you're not doing that, you're kind of at the mercy of, especially in different times of year. Like when I didn't have that to begin with, and I was brewing in the summer, I mean, my beer was literally pushing like 80 plus degrees, right? So
yeah, and you'll pick up some weird esters there and fusels. And the important thing is that, yeast doesn't really care too much about making beer. Its real job is that it just wants to eat sugar. It's like this big fat guy that comes in and it, sits down at the table and starts eating everything in sight, and then eating everybody else's plate, and, making a big mess and being noisy, and then just walks out the room when it's done. And, what you want it to do is you want to moderate that behavior. You need to harness it in and keep it at the temperatures where you want it. And you want to raise it up, because otherwise it will go eat everything in sight and then crash out and leave a big mess behind. And as long as you're just kind of nursing it along, it will clean up its own messes as it stays active. Some of those things that we call off flavors, the yeast will consume those back if you keep it active through the end of fermentation and a little bit beyond. It will go back and clean up after itself. If what you've done is you've just let it get super hot and then cool down, the yeast will go to sleep and it will leave all of that mess behind that it's introduced into your beer. And you'll be like, oh, there's an awful lot of diacetyl in this, or, oh, there's this acetaldehyde in here. And it's like, well, that's kind of your fault because you didn't keep the yeast happy long enough.
Yeah, I would go so far as to say that temperature control is, wouldn't you consider that to be one of the very first things that you'd want to invest in if you were trying to do something like speed brewing?
Yeah, absolutely.
Items that you can control. I feel like that's one of the top of the list things that you want to invest money in.
Yeah, and that's if you're already kegging. I mean, you know, because you probably won't be able to do this if you're not kegging either.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So
those two things, and always just yeast health and fermentation temperature control and sanitation, like that. Those are elemental to everything, and those are really where you got to double down on this, because you know they say with homebrewers a lot. They'll say like, "Oh, time heals all." You know, it's hard to brew a crappy beer if you just give it some time. But you don't really have time here. And usually what that time is that yeast going back and cleaning up your mistakes in the bottle or in the keg. If you let a beer sit and you're like, I don't know, I left it alone in the closet for 6 months. And when I came back, it was great. It's like, yeah, there was a tiny amount of yeast left behind and it consumed all the crap flavor from that beer.
I feel like it's kind of a cool challenge to say, hey, can I within 2 to 3 weeks, can I do beer, ferment it, and serve it within that short period of time and make it taste good, right? So if you can do that, I mean, that's a lot of like breweries. I mean, that's how they make money. They can't sit there and let their beer sit in lager for 30 days. That's just not financially feasible, right? So to have that skill to be able to turn a beer around in a quick time period is very beneficial, no matter what your vision is for where you want to take your hobby, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's a reason that, you know, that the pro brewers can turn these beers around really quickly. And that's because they're very good at the fundamentals, that they can turn their commercial beers around quickly and free up tanks for the next beer quickly because they know what they're doing, you know, and they don't have it just sitting around taking up space. It's back to a restaurant analogy. You know, you don't want somebody sitting at a table all night when you could have 3 people go through that table and you're, you know, you're making more money as a business. It's the same thing for the breweries. They want to get beers in and out as quickly as possible with as high a quality product that they can turn out as they can.
So what's your take on, I see you have quick carb on here. What's your take on the like shaking of the keg to force carbonate it?
I don't do like the 1 hour continuous shake that I've seen people do because I just don't think it's necessary.
The videos of the guy shaking the kegs.
Yeah, like rolling it around with his foot.
Yeah.
I've tried that. I've also found that you can definitely knock a ball lock off of your keg doing that and snap it, and then there's CO2 shooting around your house. So you don't want to snap one of those off or anything like that. But definitely, part of my process is, I'll go ahead and cover it, is forced carbonation. So I'll chill the beer as cold as I can get it. In the summertime, that might not be as cold. Not right now. When I'm done, sweetheart. I might not be able to do that as easily in the summertime because the ambient temperature in my garage is really high and it keeps my fridge from getting down into the low 30s. But this time of year, I can get a beer below freezing in my refrigerator because it's just cold out in my garage. So I'll get it as cold as I can. Like right now, I have a beer that I brewed on Thanksgiving with my brother. That was, I think, 2 weeks ago. Was that 3 weeks ago? I think it was 2 weeks ago. I've got it crashing right now at 35 degrees and I'm about to add finings to it. I'm out of biofine clear, so I'm going to add gelatin to it, and I'm going to let that gelatin grab all the yeast, drop it down to the bottom. Things flocculate faster at cold temperatures, and just as importantly, CO2 absorbs at a faster rate into solution more quickly at a lower temperature. You really can't carbonate, and that's why like warm beer fizzes. Why's my warm beer fizzing? It's like, well, because that CO2 wants out of solution quickly. If you pour a really, 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 really cold beer, you'll notice that it often doesn't foam much. Like there's no head sometimes if you pour in a beer that's damn near freezing. It will just come out looking flat, and that's because all the CO2 is in solution, and you give it a shake and all of a sudden whoosh, the head appears. That's what's happening there, is that CO2 wants to be in solution at low temperatures. So in order to carbonate quickly, get your beer cold. And I do give it a little bit of a shake on the quick carb. I don't like super duper shake it for hours on end, but I'll set it to 20, 30 PSI, give it a shake, stick it in the fridge to keep it cold, come back the next day, give it a shake, check it, see how it's doing on carbonation. And typically it's ready to go. And it's up to me now to balance it back out and get it down to a serving temperature. I'm sorry, to a serving.
What do you do? Just purge the keg and then take
Pressure.
it back to 12 PSI?
Yeah, it depends on what your system is. Some people can serve at like 4 PSI. Some people can, do it at 12. It depends on how, their line length and vertical rise and all of that stuff. Once they get their kegerators balanced, folks should know what their serving pressure is. Sometimes 12 will make a beer absolutely rocket out of somebody's keg, and sometimes it's 4. I don't know. Sometimes anywhere in between, but the key is to get that CO2 in there quickly so it's ready to serve. And then enjoy. Here's to you. So,
Great.
Yeah.
So
that guy's.
let me ask you this. What's the fastest that you've ever turned a beer around from brew day to glass?
I think that in my barley beer days, I probably turned around like a 7-day beer or a 10-day beer. And I would do that fairly frequently I would do that with a pale ale, and I would do that with a blonde ale, and I would do that with a wheat beer. I never really liked the wheat beer. And it turned out that I think that, I just didn't like wheat beers. But they can turn around really quickly too because they're served cloudy. So it really doesn't matter about,
Which of those ones, which was your favorite style to turn around quickly and you thought turned out good?
I liked the blonde ale, and I still can turn out my blonde ale pretty quickly just because on the gluten-free side, it's one I've brewed a lot of times. It's essentially my Pilsner, same as my Pilsner, but it's just brewed with an ale yeast. And that one, if you're using a fast flocculating yeast, you can get that one from grain to glass really quickly.
What are you using, like mainly pale millet, like biscuit rice?
Pale millet, rice, a little bit of Crystal 10 millet, and I think that's it. I don't think I do much else with that blonde. There might be Vienna or biscuit in there as well.
What are you using, like a 12 or 13 pounds grade bill or something like that?
Yeah, just trying to get to about 1050, whatever your efficiencies are, but trying to get to about a 1050 gravity for starting. And then I would pitch a healthy amount of a fast working yeast. Even US-05 takes a little bit longer for me to get out of suspension. That one doesn't flock real fast for me. So like something British will go really fast, and you're dealing with some esters. It might give it a little bit of a fruity taste, but that's okay in that beer.
What if you're willing to spend a little bit of extra cash? Have you what do you think about the new liquid yeasts that GFHB are selling? Do you think those would be beneficial for fast fermentation?
Absolutely. I understand that they're delivering a pretty large pitch, so that's going to help you out. That cell count is high, and it's liquid, so it's probably already sitting in some sort of media that's keeping it a little bit active, and it's probably a little more ready to go than something that needs to be, resuscitated from that drying process is pretty rough on yeast.
Yeah, I got the one that I pitched for my lager I have right now is the Czech lager strain,
Mm-hmm.
and even it was shipped beautifully. It was in a cold pack shipment with little cold sticks in there and no leakage, anything like that. It was taped around the bottle. But even when you set it out in room temperature to let it warm up a little bit, you can see that the bottle would start.
It starts to swell.
You don't let it vent, it's ready to almost explode, right? So
yeah,
that's what I know Peter and some other people had said when they got theirs. Peter actually, when he was down at Ghostfish when we had our last meeting,
mm-hmm.
he had just picked up his package up in Blaine and driven down with it, and it had leaked all over everywhere because it just got so warm and it just wanted to start.
Yeah, they want to start doing that. And a certain local yeast company who used to package their yeast in little aluminum cans found out that, even those cans, a rigid package like that, they were having some failures on people when the yeast would warm up and they, customers would go to open it and the thing would blow up,
Wow.
Which was dangerous. There were some injuries, but they found a way to, have less gas go into the can but in their early days, they were having those cans fail on them because that pressure from the active yeast, it expels a lot of CO2 and it's ready to go. So keep them cold until it's time to use them.
So if you got a little bit extra money to throw around, then maybe liquid yeast.
Absolutely.
Help you pitch a liquid yeast. But at the same time, I feel like if you're doing a 1050 beer and you just pitch one package of dry SO4, I feel like it's going to be a fast fermentation, right?
It'll ferment, yeah. And SO4 works fast. It's a quick yeast. And that's one that likes to get really hot, chew through your sugars, and then crash out and leave a lot of stuff behind. So that one, it's definitely important to be stepping it up. If you notice that it's starting to near the end of fermentation, move it to, even if you don't have full fermentation temperature control set up, move it to a warmer spot in your house. Just set it closer to a heater, maybe not in the closet, move it out into the main living room where it can get up to 72. Wives and girlfriends love it when we have our pet carboy sitting in the corner, but it might be time to consider doing that so that it doesn't crash out and make a.
Yeah, that leads to an interesting question, Joe. What would your wife say is the most annoying place that you've ever put a carboy, right? Me, it's I have stuff that I'll have sitting in the bathtub. We only have one bathroom.
Okay.
Right?
That would be a bother.
It's a bother. The laundry room, blocking all of the washer and dryer. That's also a good one.
At one point, my entire coat closet was filled with conditioning beers. There were 6 cases and 2 carboys in our coat closet. And I got kicked to the garage after that. And then by far the weirdest place that I've had one is, and it's still there is a sour beer, a Consecration Russian River clone. It's a barley beer sitting in my son's bathroom vanity. And it's been there for 3 years and I got to get it out of there.
You still have a barley beer that's...
I have 15 gallons of sour beers in various places around my home that I just got to get out of here and give to somebody. So
right.
Probably my old club that I was in, PDX Brewers, will be the beneficiary of that someday. It's just a matter of just getting together and racking them out and getting them over to them. But there's 3 sours. I have a wood-aged Old Brune sitting in an oak barrel. I have that consecration clone sitting on fruit in my son's room for 3 years. And then I have 2.5 years. And then I have, and then I had 10 gallons of lambic, but I gave all those away. One went to that club, and then the other went to a friend. And all that stuff's gone now. There's also that barrel right behind me. It has like a really huge stout in it that's been there for 3 years. It probably tastes like cooking sherry at this point because it's so oxidized. But
how about
the barrel wet?
There was the brew that was done at the first anniversary party. Do you still have that? Or?
It's in the back of my brew fridge. It's super cold and it's just sitting back there. And when we decide to have that party a couple of months beforehand, I'll throw, I think that we talked about putting cacao nibs, a vanilla bean, and some oak in there and letting it have at it for a couple of months. And then packaging it for the party. But yeah, it's sitting in the back of there. I haven't touched it. It's just out of sight, out of mind. Yeah, I packaged it at Groundbreaker a couple months after it finally finished all of its stuff on the yeast. And I got it off of there and just threw it in a keg and set it in the...
Oh, so you have it in a keg then?
It's in, yeah. It's in a keg just sitting in the back of my brew fridge, uncarbonated. I put a carbonation in there to seal the lid and then just let it sit.
All right, I got you.
So it's aging.
Nice. Wow. It sounds like you got a lot of projects.
Yeah, I know. There's a lot just that need to get finished, but I've got other stuff going on, but
yep.
Unfinished business.
Well, hopefully we get maybe, I don't know, do you want to do another meeting at like the end of January?
Yeah, we'll talk about doing that. January, I think, is probably the best time to bring it back up. It won't be the big party, but,
Yeah, I think, the holidays will be done, and then maybe we can get some more participation, have a regular meeting, and with a topic TBD, I guess, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, cool. All right, sounds good.
Well, cool. All righty. I think I got to go finish up the rest of my week and stuff. I don't have nothing else to add. You?
Nope, I'm good. Thanks for joining, and I'll see you next time. All right, take care.
Great. See you. Thanks. Bye. Stop video.